some people look at that and say, oh, $1,000, now I can go buy something for $1,000. I can, buy a PlayStation or, I don't know, a gadget, a laptop. I think of it as, hey, if I go invest that $1,000, then in maybe 5 to 7 years, that'll turn into $1,000 a year forever. And if I turn around and invest that, then in another maybe 10 years, that'll turn into $1,000 a month. And so for me, that's what's appealing about, if I can make a little bit of money now, I can tuck that away and turn it into even more money tomorrow.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henchi. Hello, everybody. Today we have Joel Fine. He's located in Austin, Texas. He's a multifamily real estate syndicator as well as a ground-up developer. He has over 1,100 units as a GP and over 7,000 units as a KP and LP. So we are very excited. He has like an ocean of knowledge to share with us. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much, Hans. Appreciate it. I appreciate the chance to talk to your audience.
Awesome. So, Joel, I know you've been a project manager before. How did you get into real estate in like the later stage of your professional career?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story that. So towards the end of my career, I didn't know it was going to be the end of my W-2 career, but my wife and I decided that we wanted to move from California to Texas. And we knew at the time that we were a few years away from being able to make that move. So what we did is, in preparation, we decided to invest in a single-family home in Texas, not too far from where we wanted to live. And for us, that was sort of an investment hedge, just in case strange things happened to the real estate market, either where we lived at the time in California or in Texas. It gave us kind of an insurance policy to say, hey, if all else fails, at least we've got this property that we can then fall back on, either to live in or to sell and go buy something that we do want to live in, depending on where exactly we want to be and what kind of home we want. So that was the first property I bought. It was a single family residence in Round Rock, Texas, just outside of Austin. And that was what I call my gateway drug to real estate. Once I bought that one, I became very interested in investment real estate. I learned that markets can cash flow. I'd lived in California for 30 plus years, and I assumed that all real estate was like California real estate. And, for those who are familiar with California, it's very expensive, but even more importantly, it's expensive relative to the rents you can get. And so when you buy something in California, you're really counting on appreciation. You're not going to get any cash flow. You're not going to get enough rent to pay all your expenses, your mortgage, and so forth. So once I bought the home in Round Rock and understood the market in the Austin area, I realized that was sort of a limiting belief I had about real estate, was that real estate doesn't really cash flow. The only way you make money out of it is appreciation. That was completely invalid, completely incorrect. And that first investment helped me to learn that.
So that was like your eye-opening moment about real estate?
It was, yeah. I mean, I've had a few more since, in particular about multifamily real estate, but that was definitely an epiphany for me for getting into investment real estate.
So then what was your natural progression from there? Did you look into more single family homes, or, I mean, now looking backwards, you have thousands of units under management. How did that natural journey go for you?
Yeah, so after I bought that first single family home, I decided to go and look in other markets because we were already investing remotely. We were living in California, invested in Texas. So I thought, hey, if I can invest in Texas, I can invest anywhere. So I looked around at other markets in the U.S. and decided I was going to go after the highest cash flow I could possibly find. So I ended up buying some things in Ohio, bought some duplexes and triplexes and a couple of quads. I think I ended up accumulating about 35 doors of relatively small properties, not the large-scale multifamily properties I do now. And that my focus at the time was strictly on cash flow. And so I bought some properties in Ohio. At the same time, though, I was also learning about the larger scale opportunities. So this was, again, still when I was in California. And as part of my self-education, I was learning everything I could from all sources I could find. One of the sources was I would go to meetups in California. And one of the meetups I was attending regularly was run by a group of syndicators who were living in the Bay Area and investing in Dallas. And so through that group of syndicators, I learned about how to invest in larger scale commercial properties. And that was another eye-opening experience for me. So initially, I decided to participate as a passive investor. And since I was interacting with, I got to know this particular group of syndicators who were running the meetup. I decided to invest in their next deal. So it was a 196 unit property in Denton, Texas, north of Dallas. Kind of a C property, maybe a C plus neighborhood. And figured I'll invest passively, try to learn as much as I can about that property, that business model. It was a fairly typical value add multifamily deal. They were going to renovate the units, put in new flooring, paint, countertops, cabinets, that sort of thing. And so I jumped in as a passive investor, again, just to learn as much as I could. Since I knew the sponsors of that deal, I talked them into letting me dial into their weekly calls with their property manager. And so I would just, every week I would do that for an hour. I would dial in, put myself on mute and listen. Again, that was part of my self-education. And as I did that, I guess one of the things I learned was that managing an asset like a 200-unit apartment building is not that complicated. It's not rocket science. There's a lot of operational decisions to be made, a lot of tasks that you got to take care of, lots of follow-up. Very similar to skills that I had built and exercised as a program manager in my high-tech career, actually.
Yeah. So taking those 35 units that you had in Ohio compared to, for example, a 200-unit project that you have today, what would you say is more time-consuming and more of a headache?
Oh, well, I would say that I spend less time on my 200-unit properties than I do on a duplex. And part of that is because I've partnered up on the bigger stuff. So all of the projects that I've done that are 100 units and up, I've got 2 or 3 or 4 partners that are working it with me. And so we share the load. And in particular, my role in a lot of my deals is front loaded. I spend a lot of time helping to get the transaction through, helping to close on the property. And then once we close, my partners tend to take the lead on managing the asset. I continue to participate. I dial into the weekly calls with the property manager. I share my opinion. I'm on the phone with them, but really the day-to-day, my partners are managing. So I end up spending a lot less time on the bigger properties that I partner up on than I do, let's say, on a duplex that I bought in Ohio. Stuff I bought in Ohio, it's all fairly old. I was looking for things that could be renovated and would give me a good discount. But because they're old and in need of renovation, winters in Ohio are brutal, very difficult on properties. And so there's lots of repairs. And with that, lots of decisions that need to be made about those properties. So even though I had a third-party property manager running those properties day to day, managing tenants, doing the lease up, doing the advertising, so all that daily work was taken care of for me. But even so, there was just a lot of time spent on each of my duplexes and triplexes, making decisions and giving guidance to the property manager on what to do day to day.
Yeah. And going from that first home that you bought in Austin, Texas, to those duplexes in Ohio, to the first large-scale multifamily acquisition. So how much time did elapse in there, and how much do you think your previous career was fundamental to the success and the progression of what you were doing?
So yeah, going from buying duplexes to sponsoring my own deals was probably about a year and a half to 2 years. I was passively investing almost immediately as I started to do buy the duplexes for myself, but it wasn't for a while yet until I started syndicating my own deals. And then, sorry, you asked another question. I lost track of it.
Well, the question was, how much was your previous career fundamental to the success of what you're doing?
Right. So I think it was important in a couple of ways. One, more significant, was the skills that I built up. Like I said, I'd been a program manager and a project manager in my W-2 job and at various IT companies, working as an engineer and then a project manager. And so the skills I built up in that capacity really were essential in managing an asset, managing a property manager, and making decisions about a property. Scheduling things, holding people accountable, keeping track of details. All those things are really essential to both managing an asset and managing a project. So that was important. That was very helpful. The other thing was, because I worked for a long time in a W-2 job, my wife also was in high tech. So she and I had both lived below our means for many years and tucked away a fair amount of our income for 20, 30 years. And that allowed us to build up a nice nest egg, which I've since used to deploy to help me get into a lot of deals, both passively and actively.
What made you do that? Was that something that you've been taught as a kid or as a teenager by your parents? Or where did the mindset come from to stash away some cash and make smart decisions later down the road? I feel like right now a lot of people are overextended and they do quite the opposite. And it's not very natural for people to live below their means. Where did that common sense in a way for you come from?
It's hard to say. I mean, I guess I have to credit my parents. It wasn't that they explicitly told me, "Hey, don't spend money." It was just sort of the environment I lived in.
Yeah.
My dad was a physician, so he made a pretty good income, but we never lived that well. We lived in a decent house. We had nice vacations here and there, but we weren't living an upper class lifestyle that you might think of when you think of somebody who's in the family of a doctor. And so they were just very consistently living below their means. And as a kid, I just didn't know anything different. I guess it seeped into me.
Yeah.
And I've just always liked the idea of doing that, of living below my means, tucking away some money, saving up so that I could live even better later. Some people look at it, let's say make $1,000 from either a job or a bonus or an investment paying off. Some people look at that and say, oh, $1,000, now I can go buy something for $1,000. I can, buy a PlayStation or, a gadget, a laptop. I think of it as, hey, if I go invest that $1,000, then in maybe 5 to 7 years, that'll turn into $1,000 a year forever. And if I turn around and invest that, then in another maybe 10 years, that'll turn into $1,000 a month. And so for me, that's what's appealing about, if I can make a little bit of money now, I could tuck that away and turn it into even more money tomorrow.
But that obviously requires a lot of patience and like one has to be able to see that in the future. It's almost like the marshmallow test, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And yeah, I'm guessing that I would have passed the marshmallow test. I don't think I ever went through that, but yeah, that was always my mindset, just from a very early age. Deferred gratification is the phrase, and I've just always been about that.
Yeah. And how do you think parents can instill that in their kids? Like, I think many people are still wondering, it's like, how do we pass those important skills on or values to the next generation?
That's a great question. Certainly living those values is essential. You kind of have to start there. But also communicating to the kids, letting them know that's what you're doing. You're not spending every money as it comes, every dollar as it comes in. You're tucking some of it away. You're living a less opulent lifestyle than you could if you just looked at the dollars coming into the bank account.
Yeah.
I think just sharing that and helping your kids understand what that means to a later, to yourself later in life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think I saw my father very much just living it never really teaching it to me. And then later it was just like this aha moment for me where I'm like, he's actually always just played it very low key and just very consistently played the game rather than living a lavish lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he certainly passed that on to me without saying a word, which probably is just, as you said, it's just living it rather than talking about it at times.
Yeah, and I think my parents did talk about it, but they talked about it in context. Like, for example, one of the reasons that they deliberately chose to live beneath their means was they were putting away money for the education of my brothers and me.
Yeah.
Because college was very expensive back then. It's even more expensive now. And so that's one of the major expenses that any family is going to face. And so they helped us to understand that that's what they were doing, is they were saving money, living a little bit less lifestyle than they could have afforded, so that later on, when it came time to send us to whatever colleges we chose to go to, they were in a financial position to write those big checks.
Yep. I mean, especially in the US, those are pretty big checks.
Yep.
I'm fortunate enough growing up in Europe that those are not that sizable, and there's a lot of that which comes from the overall public system. But here it's like a serious investment into the education of the kids.
Absolutely, yeah. Between the home you live in and the education, that's probably the two biggest expenses of any family.
Yeah. So then what got you so hooked on real estate? I mean, it's not, you didn't just start buying a couple of units. Like at this point, I see you going all out. I see you on multiple meetup groups, and you're very, very active. Like, it seems that you really appreciate what you got yourself into at this stage of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I have fun with it, which is really important. But I guess what appeals to me about it is that I feel like I can really create some significant value by making decisions and taking actions that I'm taking. So by bringing people along with me, by partnering up both on the general partner side and by partnering with my limited partners, I can really join forces with other people, and by virtue of the work that I'm doing, really change a lot of lives.
Yeah.
I think of it as I'm helping my fellow general partners manage these assets, get them under contract, get them purchased, and get them renovated. I'm also helping my passive investors, dozens of them on each deal. I'm helping them get a return on their investment and hopefully some peace of mind that they've got a nice diversification and a good risk-reward ratio. And I'm helping tenants. I'm improving these properties, which improves the lifestyle of my tenants. So instead of living in an old, rundown, property that maybe has a lot of trash or just doesn't look good, now it's, after we're done with it, it's a fresh, repainted, upgraded property that people can really have pride of residency in, that they can, instead of saying, I have to live here because I can't afford any place better, it's, I get to live here. Look how beautiful it is. And so that combination of helping people in various ways, my investors, my tenants, my co-GPs, that's just fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I feel the same way about it. I think that's what really attracted me, is that ability that everybody can win in it, from the tenants to the investors and even the people working on the properties. I think there is a big win-win situation here, and it's very relatable, like compared to other investment classes like stocks, where I have no idea where the money is going or where the entail of that impact is. So that's one of the things I really appreciated about real estate.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing I would point out is, at least in my experience, is I've been able to observe what I would call the abundance mindset in real estate that really didn't exist in my W-2 high-tech job. If in my high-tech job, people compete pretty hard. If you're in a different company from somebody else, you've got your trade secrets, you've got your intellectual property. If you need help, or if your friend needs help, odds are pretty good you're not really going to be communicating openly and candidly about what's going on. And there's just sort of this mindset of, hey, if I help somebody else, it's kind of at my expense.
Yeah.
And so people are a little bit reluctant to really open up and help. But I just don't see that in real estate. In real estate, there's like I said, an abundance mindset where people just are very enthusiastic and eager to help one another.
Yep.
If I'm struggling with, I don't know, let's say an underwriting spreadsheet, hey, I'm not sure about the assumptions I'm making. I can go to any of a dozen people that I know and just, open kimono. I'll show them my spreadsheet. I'll say, here's something that's puzzling me about this property or this deal. What do you think? And I'm confident that they'll be happy to give it their all to, help me out with their insights. And I'm not worried about them, taking my spreadsheet and doing something that's disadvantageous to me, like, I don't know, stealing the deal or something.
Yeah.
People just don't do that. That mindset just doesn't exist in real estate. And so that's just a really positive thing. It's a nice environment to be in when you're interacting on that basis.
I agree. The first time I flew in from New York, and I went to one of the meetups in Dallas, and everybody was like so open and super helpful and willing to share. And I was like, can't believe it. Like, especially coming from New York, where it's like a shark environment almost, and the first thing you get is someone else's elbow. And then you go into the multifamily real estate space, and especially maybe down south, and people are just so open and willing to help and share. And
it's very fluid in the sense that people partner up. We form partnerships very quickly. There's one story I like to tell where I showed up at a property viewing one Saturday, and the guy who was finishing the property viewing right before me, the same property, was a friend, somebody I had seen in a number of meetups. And so immediately when we saw each other, we knew that we were going to be competing for this property. We had a laugh about it. We shook hands, we chatted for a minute or two, and then he left and I did my tour. But then that evening when I got back home, I called him up and I said, hey, what do you think of this property? And we chatted for a little while. We talked about what we thought. And right there on the phone call, we said, hey, let's partner up on this one. Let's put in an LOI together. And that's what we did. We didn't end up getting that particular property, but that's just the kind of thing that happens in real estate. You just you partner up with people in ways that, you might, in other industries, you'd be competing. And in real estate, you're partnering.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really nice one. Like, instead of competing, you just end up partnering, and everybody wins. And I think that's really the overall mindset that I've seen. It's a very paying forward community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you manage to educate yourself so quickly? Because your progression from like those single family purchases to the duplexes to having those larger acquisitions now went rather quickly. So I mean, obviously you were already very eager to learn because you intentionally went into LP positions and tried to tag along on the calls. But what made you progress so quickly?
Well, so once I got into real estate, I just wanted to know everything I could about it. And so I educated myself as aggressively as possible. So I would find any educational resource that I could. So that ranged from books. I probably read 3 or 4 dozen books on the topic.
Yeah.
Podcasts. I'd listened to literally hundreds of hours of podcasts. Each day when I walk my dog, I put in the earbuds, and some syndicator walks my dog with me in my ears, interviewing somebody about deals that they've done or challenges that they've faced and overcome. So books and podcasts are just the beginning. I was active for quite some time on Bigger Pockets. I'm less active now, but that's mostly because I'm a little more focused on multifamily, and Bigger Pockets tends to be more for the single family investor.
Yeah.
But that's a fantastic resource. What else? Blogs. I would read every blog post I could find. And then I mentioned meetups. I would attend as many meetups as I could find too. And more recently, I've started running my own meetup here in Austin. And that's been a fantastic source of not so much education as just relationships. And that's part of relationships is really part of the education that I pursued, is getting to know people who I could then talk to. I guess at the beginning, I sort of looked at other syndicators, other people who were doing it already, and when I wasn't. And I thought, okay, what's the difference between me and that person who's syndicating 200 unit deals? And I think I kind of reached the conclusion that there were two fundamental differences. They know things that I don't know, and they know people that I don't know. And so I set about to fix both of those things. So I learned as much as I could through books, podcasts, meetups, relationships, blogs, everything. And then, like I said, I tried to develop relationships wherever I could through meetups and other sources so that I could overcome those two challenges, that syndicators knew new things and new people that I didn't know.
Yeah. So did you at any point had some hesitation, like going into a bigger deal or maybe reaching out to that next level person that you wanted to connect with? I think there are many people who are struggling more with actually taking the step of just doing things. Do you feel like you had any such reservations?
So I'm kind of a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. Sometimes that gets me into trouble, but a bias for action has never been my problem. I've never hesitated to jump into things. But for other folks who are looking to break in, now that I've got a bunch of deals under my belt, I'm doing development, I'm doing multifamily. Somebody who's new might find that a little intimidating. They might think, "Oh, how can I talk to this guy?" So I would encourage you to consider, if you're a beginner, reach out to people who are just one or two steps ahead of you and connect with them and get to know them. And then reach out to people who are a little further ahead than that and just try to figure out how you could potentially add value to somebody else's life. And that can come in all kinds of different forms. You can be somebody who finds deals and does the initial underwriting, and then you bring it to somebody with more experience and look for opportunities to partner up. Maybe you've got relationships and you can connect different people to one another. Maybe you're the boots on the ground. You live somewhere that has a lot of deal flow, and so you can be the person that visits the property on a regular basis while the more experienced syndicator is out of town and doesn't have to come into town too often. So there's a lot of different ways you can add value. So I guess I would make those two suggestions: is focus on people that are just a little bit ahead of you in the path and get to know them.
So, Joel, for other people that are moving into multifamily, do you think that the space is already too crowded? Because going to networking events and to different meetups, it just looks like there's so many syndicators in the US that are in multifamily right now. At the same time, there's so much additional capital flowing in that's looking for yield. Do you feel like this particular part of the market is getting too hot, or do you think there is room for everybody?
That's a good question. I mean, it's pretty clear cap rates are very low and seem to be getting lower. There's some threats on the horizon in terms of inflation and maybe rising interest rates. But uncertainty is always going to exist. If people are somebody who's willing to step up and do the work and overcome challenges, I think there's always going to be opportunities for people to do to create value and succeed in the space. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it's overcrowded and people should just stay away, but I definitely would exercise caution, just like at any time. Do very careful due diligence. Expect to have to look at a lot of deals before you find one that works. Be careful who you partner up with. Be very picky about the deals you get into. But there's always opportunities to create value. In the value add multifamily space, I always say it's really like a fix and flip, but on a larger scale. And there's always properties that are going to need improvement of one sort or another. So just be ready to do the work.
When you say be careful who you partner up with, how do you vet your partners? At the same time, you said you had a large action bias. How do you tend to do your due diligence on the people that you actually partner up with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I like to get to know them and just understand what their attitude is and what their investment strategy and operational strategy is all about. What kinds of deals are they looking for? What are their criteria? What makes them think a deal is worth pursuing or not pursuing? I also like to understand their track record. What have they done before? And how similar is this new deal to things that they've done before? And, if it's not very similar, if they're getting into something new, what steps have they taken to overcome the learning curve to understand? So if it's somebody that has been doing multifamily for a long time and now they're getting into storage or retail or office or anything, what are they doing to learn about that market so that they make good decisions? Because the parameters and the characteristics of properties that make a good multifamily investment may be different than the characteristics of a good office investment. So those are things I look for. I get to know them. I like to make sure that it's somebody that I can trust, and then I learn as much as I can about their track record and who else they've dealt with, and whether they've got good, solid relationships.
Would you say
with other
that
folks
trust
that I know.
is the most important part in the equation, or is it the connections or the savviness, the intelligence to maybe syndicate deals?
I'd say without trust, it's really that's the what you might call table stakes. You really have to have trust before you can even bother to engage in the rest of the conversation. So that's the foundation. Then after that, you learn everything else you need to know.
Where were you able to have like the best connections? Is it usually because you went to meetup groups, or is it during COVID where you're able to forge similar kind of connections online through virtual meetups? Or what does it take for you to actually, for example, pursue a partnership? I always, for myself, I kind of have that rule of breaking bread. At the very least, I want to have like a comfortable meal with someone to actually get to know them and kind of understand their overall situation. What is kind of that threshold for you?
Yeah, I think for me, what works best is in-person interaction and one-on-one interaction. So if I can have a conversation with somebody, let's say start at a meetup, and then if it seems like it's promising, maybe go have coffee or lunch together. That's where I can build the best foundation for a relationship. I do have connections and relationships with folks that I've only known through Zoom meetings. But that's sort of the exception rather than the rule.
So now that you've already built a significant portfolio and you went into developing ground up projects, where do you think you want to take this over the next couple years?
So I'm having fun doing both. I really like the value add multifamily, and I also really like doing ground up development. And within ground up development, one of the submarkets that I want to get into is subdivisions, meaning with ground up development, there's a bunch of steps in the process of developing a property, and the early steps are to maybe get it approved for a particular use by the controlling government authority. So maybe that's rezoning, maybe it's getting permits, maybe it's bringing in utilities, could be even building roads. Once you do all of that stuff, then you've got a property that's ready to be built. And that's a strategy that I want to try, is to get a property to that point and then sell off the lots to builders or owner occupants who want to build something on the lots. That's a really intriguing strategy for me because it's relatively fast turnaround. A lot of the time that's spent in a ground-up development project is actually in the vertical construction. So if I can create some value out of the land by subdividing it and then selling it off, I can do that relatively quickly. And it also takes a lot less capital. To purchase a piece of land and then to resell it, it's a lot less expensive a proposition than to actually build something on it. You'll miss out on some of the profit by not doing the building, but like I said, it's very capital intensive to actually do the construction. And so if I can realize a good fraction of the value with a subdivision, I think there's
still a significant yield from going from a large parcel and into the subdivision, right? So you still capture large chunk of the value you're generating there.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's a large chunk of that value.
I find it so fascinating how you keep moving into the different aspects of real estate, but at the same time, it's for you. It's like, yeah, this is just what I want to do. I feel like, where does that mindset come from you? Because there is just other people who would already be scared looking at the multifamily space, but now you're like, yeah, I just want to go and do those ground up subdivision projects. Like it seems, is that just your action bias, or is that something where you're just so naturally curious? Where does that come from to go to the next step in those things?
That's a good question. I mean, I think my attitude has always been, like I said, that other syndicators, they know things I don't know, and they know people I don't know. So that's fixable. I can do that. And then if I see a business strategy that seems like it'll work, I'm happy to go partner up with folks who have experience on that business strategy and learn from them. And if I can bring value to them by taking on some element of the deal, either maybe I help raise capital and they do the operational elements of the deal, whatever. I'm just very open to trying new things and exploring the space.
So, which have been some of the books out of the 36 books that you mentioned that you think were like the best to start with for someone that's just listening into your entire journey? Like, where would you recommend them to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually keep a list of books on my website, lakelineproperties.com. And that list, I think I've got about 10 or 12 books on the list, divided up in different categories, for people who maybe people who want to get into passive investing but aren't interested in sponsoring deals. There's a couple of really phenomenal books in that category. There's other books that for people who've just never done real estate and just want to learn about investing in real estate. So yeah, like I said, on my website, there's about a dozen books. My favorites, I'd say one of the first books I read was called Long Distance Real Estate Investing by David Green from Bigger Pockets. That book helped me to overcome some of my fears about investing in places that were geographically far from me. Just as the title suggests, long distance real estate investing. So, living in California, investing in Texas, before I had done any investing, that was a really scary prospect. But this book really broke it down step by step, saying, hey, here are the relationships you need to build. Here are the people you need to know. Here are the steps to take. Even had sample emails you can send to people to introduce yourself and get the conversation started. So really just a nice recipe book for how to go about investing from a distance. And then I guess the other one that I really liked was The Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke. That one is a really great resource for anybody who's looking to invest passively in other people's deals. It gives a good framework for evaluating those deals.
So where can people connect with you, given that you just shared your website? Is that a good spot for people to start connecting with you if they want to hear more about the books you recommend or the deals you're doing?
Yeah, so lakelineproperties.com is my website. On that website, there's a contact form people can fill out and get the conversation started. Or they can just send me an email directly. It's joel@lakelineproperties.com. Send me an email and we can talk about
Joel
real estate.
really seems to enjoy talking about real estate. Is that like a flow state experience almost? I feel like the way you jump into it and the way I experience you on meetups and networking events, it's like seems to be something that you genuinely enjoy. Yeah,
I do. I tell people I have fun with this, and I've been saying for more than a year now that as soon as I stop having fun, as soon as it starts to feel like work, then I'll just back away from the sponsoring and the active investing, and I'll just go passive. Because now I know people like you and other syndicators that I can park my money with. So if I get to the point where I don't like the work involved, or I want to go off and do other things, maybe just enjoy retirement or travel with my wife or whatever, Then I'll just invest passively and let other people
And
take the
you
take the
just sit
responsibility
somewhere
and the work.
nicely at the beach, and the quarterly checks come in, cash flowing.
Exactly. Yep. I'll just be sipping my Mai Tais and
I
letting
mean
somebody else
that's
manage
the
the
beauty,
properties.
right, of this. And I think what you just shared, that the day it starts feeling like work, I would say that's such an important piece to the puzzle of a fulfilled life at the stage you're in, right? It's like to have that. It's a hobby for you. It allows you to travel a little bit. You get to connect with other people. You get to go out and do something. I think that's a very healthy kind of obsession you have, because at the end of the day, you're still investing a significant amount of your time right now in this.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm working about as hard as I ever have in a W-2 job, but I love it. It's just fun, and so it doesn't feel like work. And as long as it stays that way
Yeah.
for me, I'm going to keep
I
pursuing it.
hope
Keep
that
doing
many
it.
people have that level of self-awareness and tune into those aspects of their life where it doesn't feel like work. Like one of the major parts of real estate for me is also the connecting with people, which never feels like work. Like, I mean, when you and me meet in Dallas, for example, over dinner, I can barely say that that's considered work in any way. It's just good times, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the cool things about real estate is there's so many different ways to approach it that any individual can figure out which of those ways is appealing, which skills they want to exercise and develop, and which parts of the business they'd rather just have somebody else do, and then partner up with somebody with a compatible, complementary set of preferences. If you're somebody that loves spreadsheets and loves digging around in the numbers, that's great. Go do that and go find somebody who wants to develop relationships with brokers and go visit properties and so forth. And the two of you together can do amazing things that neither one of you by yourself would be able to do.
That piece of self-awareness to know what you're really good at, and then double down on that and find the people that kind of cover your blind spots in a great team. Well, awesome,
totally
Joel. So glad we had you on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your story and your experience around all of the different aspects of real estate and your personal journey.
It's been my pleasure. I'm happy to talk to you, Hans.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.